Let's get perspective on the situation that is unfolding in Sudan. Former ambassadors Anil Trigunayat and Goel joining us to lend perspective on what is really kind of a very difficult situation for Indians especially who are stranded in Sudan. Mr. Trigunayat, coming to you first, do tell us about what we know about the Indians who are stranded over there.
As you know, one of the Indians was killed in this recently, and our embassy and the government of India has informed most of the Indians who were registered with the embassy and others through the channels, because the fighting is going on in the streets and everywhere, to stay indoors. And the government of India is trying to arrange for their evacuation, for which obviously the government is in touch with all the concerned parties, be it the external leaders like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or for the matter UAE, as well as the US and the United Nations. At the same time, we are also continuing to work with the countries that are very much there, the troika of the countries, the presidents of Djibouti, the president of South Sudan, and that of Kenya. All three of them, who are the only ones who are at the moment corresponding and talking to these two leaders and trying to create the ceasefire conditions where the planes can go in and can bring out the people outside. Of course, it will have to be done more closely. And India's control room, as you know, the Prime Minister himself has been monitoring the situation and that's going on. The Indians, of course, we have about 3,000 of them and they are sparsely populated. So it will not be that easy to bring them out in one go. It will have to be a continuous process. There has to be some kind of a continuous ceasefire in different parts so that the foreigners can at least leave. And I hope that the good sense prevails on both the leaders, General Burhan and General Hemeti, so that they provide conditions so that the outsiders or the foreigners do not suffer. And if the war in the meantime stops between the two sides, it will be much better for them, but it looks very unlikely in the short term.
Mr. Goel, do weigh in on this. How critical is the situation right now in Sudan? To be able to evacuate the Indians who are stranded over there, the government has a task on their hands. What lessons were learned from the kind of war situation we had in Ukraine, wherein we also had to evacuate Indians in that kind of crisis?
I don't think we can compare the situation in Ukraine with what we are now facing in Sudan. Probably a closer parallel would be our evacuation from the war situation in the other countries in the Middle East, like Syria, even though at a much larger scale, from Yemen, slightly lesser scale, Iraq was much earlier. But the fact is that Sudan, and Ambassador Trigunayat has already spoken on this, and your summary was quite on the spot, really, in that sense. Sudan's situation is quite volatile, considering the fact that the ceasefire agreement between the two factions has been broken so easily. Clearly, there is a huge deficit of trust or any confidence between the two factions, and therefore, it's quite likely that they will continue to be the fighting between the two factions, involving even the civilian population and endangering their lives. And therefore, I think, given the besides the political situation back at home in India, but also because of expectations from the government, our performance in the evacuation in earlier cases has been quite good, really. And the expectation now amongst the Indian community really is that the government will be able to evacuate them. Need arises, and if those expectations are not to be fulfilled, this could become quite catastrophic politically. And therefore, I think we need to take action sooner rather than later in terms of evacuating them. At the moment, the situation would still permit over surface route to get to the Red Sea through Ethiopia and get onto the Red Sea coast, Djibouti, etc. Kenya is a good option really to evacuate. But I think the basic point is that given the political situation, it has to be done quickly. Vikram.
That's right. Mr. Trigunayat, do tell us, at times like this, How does a country leverage its diplomatic relations with neighboring countries? How vital is it? And where does India stand in this particular case? You did mention the neighboring countries, and India is going to seek their help to be able to evacuate stranded Indians there. How critical is it to be able to leverage that, and how exactly is it done, sir?
Well, Vikram, in the first place, I would like to tell you that India has perhaps the best track record of evacuating its people who are its primary responsibility and primary priority in every conflict zone. I have been myself the ambassador in Libya, and we had evacuated a very large number of people from exactly the same kind of conflict zones. There, of course, this depends on the kind of goodwill we have. I'm quite sure our ambassador would have reasonable connections with both General Burhan as well as General Hemedti, and could, I mean, this is what I did in Libya to evacuate our people, to talk to both the warring sides, and they provided us the leeway to get out. And I'm sure that is there. And then in the meantime, we are well prepared, and it's a well-oiled exercise to evacuate and use the logistics, which is done very much. We have also facilities in Djibouti, which is the nearest there. And of course, as Ambassador Goel mentioned, Kenya is another country that is very helpful to us. So will be the South Sudan. From there as well, we can do Chad as well. We have good relations. And the external powers, the problem with them is that most of them are aligned to one group or the other faction. I mean, that is the reason that the trustfulness is not very much there. So I think the Egyptians also are very much involved in this, and they have good relations with the government there. On the other hand, as I said, the UAE supports the RSF, whereas the Egyptians and everybody else supports the others. So this is something that is going to be a problem. So I think the India's own diplomatic finesse and own standing would be far greater in this sense. But at the same time, I believe that we have to be very cautious in evacuating in these kind of times when the firing is going on and people can unnecessarily get caught in fires, and how to bring them about. So for that, we always have a contingency plan, and that's what Prime Minister has asked us to activate the plan and to evacuate the Indians at the fastest. But that will also depend on how the situation holds out. If they extend the ceasefire and there are not many incidents happening, then it will be possible to at least take out people from Khartoum and certain other areas rather quickly.
Mr. Goel, how significant is the fact that the Prime Minister has gotten involved and has been able to chair this critical meeting to evacuate Indians?
Important. Prime Minister, of course, the current Prime Minister that we have, Narendra Modi, he's a hands-on Prime Minister. Even in the past, whenever there have been situations threatening the Indian community abroad, he has come into play, immediately taken charge of the situation, given instructions for the missions to take certain actions. And therefore, that is one part of it. But I think, given the kind of exchange that we have had just a few days ago between the Minister Jaishankar and other political party, I think Prime Minister is very sensitive. The situation could become a political hotspot unless dealt with some kind of sensitivity. Therefore, my own sense would be, I could be proven wrong on this, but my own instinct would be that the Prime Minister is going to take charge of the situation personally, at least for a few more days to come. And in those few more days, if the situation in Sudan stabilizes, well and good. Otherwise, any evacuation operation will be directly overseen by the Minister, Jaishankar, and supervised by the Prime Minister because of the political factors, as we all know. Vikram.
Mr. Trigunayat, do you see major challenges up ahead as far as the situation in Sudan is concerned, and for India, as far as evacuating Indians over there? How difficult and what are the big challenges? Because you did mention the existence of a contingency plan that gets activated in times like this. As far as reaction from the Indian government is concerned, it did come on the back of a political kind of exchange of words between politicians. But at this point in time, were we late in activating the contingency plan? What are the challenges?
No, Vikram. In fact, every embassy and every ambassador is supposed to have a contingency plan ready for evacuations in any circumstances. It is not something that we craft at the time time or activate it. It is activated immediately, and embassies start working on collecting people in certain places and activating the coordinators in every area, how we are going to evacuate. And in Delhi, we have a control room which works 24/7. And of course, the numbers, the telephone numbers and others for the family members, etc., are also activated. So this is a standard protocol that we follow in the embassies. But what happens is the ground situation when war is taking place, frankly, there are firing taking place. You don't want to put your people into the line of fire. And that's why you have to find an opportunity that somehow a ceasefire happens. So I'm not giving due credence to this recent political fallout, what happened with that. Irrespective of that, the priority of the Indian government always has been to protect and evacuate its citizens. This has happened in the past, this has happened many times, and currently also this is a priority for the government. So I think that is a given for us. So that is, I think this is very well oiled, but of course, every situation is different. But whenever there are these civil wars take place where the militia groups, the military and others are firing at each other indiscriminately, then we don't want our people to get caught. So therefore, you have to find a way somehow a certain kind of ceasefire happens or some understandings that for certain hours they will allow, like we did in Yemen. So it is possible. In Libya, we have done the same way. So I think that this is what is going to be played out. And both generals understand that international community will really completely go against them if they were to do that. At the end of the day, they can't survive on their own. And we have good relations with the Sudani people, and most of these people will be there. But secondly, if any of these generals have been trained in India, I'm sure we will be activating that too.
Yes. We certainly hope so, and we keep hoping and praying that Indians stranded there are evacuated safely. Ambassadors Anil Trigunayat and Suresh Goel, many thanks for joining us with your perspective on this on Rush Hour.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, we're watching